Welcome to the Unstuck Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Miner. This weekly no-fluff mindset show arms you with the practical tools you need to get unstuck so you can get exactly what you want out of life. Remember, when you change your mind, your life will follow. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the first ever episode of the Unstuck Podcast. I am so incredibly thrilled and happy and all the good vibes to be here with you right now. This podcast has been a long time in the making. It's been a dream and a vision in my head for over a year now. And finally, it's time. It's all come into alignment. And we are here right now with the first episode. I can't wait to get going. In this episode, we're going to learn a little bit more about what you can expect from the Unstuck Podcast and if it's right for you, your family, your friends, anybody you know that could benefit from the work we're going to do here on this show. And also, I want to share with you my story so you can see where I'm coming from, what I do, and how I've gotten to this place now where I feel I can have a whole podcast about mindset work. First of all, many of you may know me from my past podcast. I have been a podcaster for over 5 years as a nutritionist and teaching women how to be healthier and happier and how the food they put on their plate can act as a form of medicine. That is a huge passion of mine. We'll get into that in a little bit. So a lot of you already know my background, my history, a lot of my story, but I don't talk about my mindset story all that much. I started to towards the end there of my previous podcast, but I don't talk about it all that much because there's always so much to teach about the physical body when you're a nutritionist, and that's what I focused on. However, the need to talk about this mindset work and how that's actually impacting people's health, of course, their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health, all of that is being impacted simply by the thoughts that are coming into their minds and that they're allowing to believe every day. That started growing and growing and growing in me as my nutrition business began to expand. And now it's just gotten to a point where I can't take it anymore. I've got to talk about this stuff. I've got to do more for women to help them understand what's really going on in their heads and how that's impacting them on a daily, weekly, monthly, minutely, secondly basis. Every single second is impacted by the thoughts that you're thinking and how they are moving into your belief system and then how they are responding in the form of actions. All of this matters so much. And that is why I'm now shifting from nutrition to talking about mindset work and becoming a mindset coach. So my goal with this and with the Unstuck Podcast is to come into your life every week, every Friday with just a little bite-sized practical mindset nugget for you to improve your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. Now, quick caveat already, in my world and for the sake of this podcast, spirituality is just the thought that there is something bigger than us out there helping to guide us in our lives. That's all there is. It's not tied to any religion. It doesn't have any specific word. You can call it whatever you like, but that is what I think spiritual health means in this realm. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist. I'm a real girl that went through some real problems and got herself out of them using the tools I'm going to share here on the Unstuck Podcast. That's it. I'm just a real person. I've had some stuff happen, and in the middle of that stuff, I came out with this amazing mindset that changed everything for me, and now I want to share that with you. My education and training comes through years of reading and studying. When I was in the middle of all this stuff, I found the best books on how the mind works, how our thoughts, beliefs, and emotions affect our body and lives, how to manifest what we want, all about the law of attraction, vibrational energy, quantum mechanics, and then taking all of this information that I was learning and studying and watering it down in a way so that I could fully grasp it. I could kind of think about it in my own life, on my own terms, with my own verbiage, and then applying it. That is what I did for myself, and that is what makes the Unstuck Podcast different. I come to you with no fluff, no psychobabble, no confusing explanations that leave you with even more questions, just simple thoughts and practical real-life changes you can make today to start living life with a little more pep in your step, a little more color in your flowers, and a lot more great stuff happening to you every single day, pretty much whatever you want. And we'll find out exactly how in upcoming episodes of the Unstuck podcast. Episodes will come out every Friday and will be between 15 to 30 minutes long. Again, we're cutting out the BS. We're getting to the meat of it right away because I want you out there living life, not spending hours trying to get through one more podcast episode. So they will be short and sweet and full of all the good stuff. Most podcast episodes will be just me chatting with you, friend to friend, and that really is how I want you to think of this. It's your weekly dose of getting good advice from a good friend. That's me. On occasion, special guests will be on the show to share their own mindset journey and any special tips they have for you based on their own experience. And the coolest part, you will be featured too. That's right. I want to hear from you. I want you to share your story with others because it could and will help someone else immensely. There's nothing more powerful to this kind of work than hearing from other people that you can relate to, that you have some similarities to, and they've made it work. That's why we need your stories. So if, as this podcast progresses, you have a success story or something you'd like to share that would be helpful to this Unstuck community, head to seanminer.com/unstuckpodcast to call in and just give a 1 to 3 minute message that I will then share on a future episode. I cannot wait to hear your stories. Now back to the BS. This podcast is labeled explicit, although I do not plan to regularly use that kind of language. However, there are times when there's just no other word that describes what I need to say better than that word, whatever it may be. So I do want to put that out there. So just in case you may not want to listen to this, if your kids are in the car or around, save it for when you have your earbuds in or you are in a private place. Just want to put that out there, but please don't expect it to be a regular occurrence because that's not how I speak in real life. So why would I speak that way here? All right, so that should give you a good idea of what to expect coming up on future episodes of the Unstuck podcast. I hope you'll stick around with me. Now, let me share a little bit about my story. I know a lot of you have heard bits and pieces of this already, but I just think it is so important to help you understand why I'm now talking about what I'm talking about on the Unstuck podcast. So please just hear me out, listen to the story one more time. It will make a big difference in what comes up in future episodes and why I share it the way I do, the experience I have with it, and now am able to teach it. So let's get into my story. I've spent the past 13 years trying to help people get healthier. That's the main thing. I really think that is and always will be my calling, my passion, my purpose is to help people get healthier, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. We're doing it all here now on the Unstuck podcast, but for many years, I was focused on the physical. I started out in the fitness industry managing a gym, then became a personal trainer. It was then that I had another realization and another huge passion that came out, which was that I needed to work for myself and not someone else. I didn't do well with someone else telling me how to run my business that was all money driven when I knew innately the best way to help people, which didn't necessarily involve the money and the numbers and hitting certain goals. It was about making people healthy and happy. So right then and there, I knew it wasn't a match. I had to do this on my own. So I ditched my safe, comfortable job and became an entrepreneur at the age of 32 with absolutely no experience, no clue what to do, and $200 in my checking account. But I also had the confidence that would absolutely work out. I never once thought that it could possibly not go well. Fast forward a few years later, and my new in-home personal training business was going well, even though I was getting further and further into debt, which was 100% because of a stored money belief that I had. But we'll save that for another day. The problem was my health was fading fast. I'd been somewhat managing an autoimmune disease at the time, ulcerative colitis, through dietary changes, and it was going okay. And I had been so inspired, in fact, by using food as medicine that I enrolled in class to become a nutritional therapy practitioner. So this is where things started to change for me, and I started progressing from personal training and fitness to nutrition. The thing was, I felt awful myself through that whole entire course. I was eating really well. I was working out regularly. I was doing my best to manage my stress, getting out in nature, meditating, taking baths every night, all of the things that you're quote unquote supposed to do to be healthy. And yet I was getting sicker and sicker by the day. So another year passes, and I'm going from doctor to doctor looking for answers as to why I had developed intense fatigue, leaving me unable to get out of bed, brain fog to the point where I couldn't remember basic words or even my clients' names that I had been seeing for years, an unexplained 40 pounds of excess weight beyond my set point, hair loss, headaches, joint pain, inability to work out, and the development of yet another autoimmune disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Finally, I found an answer. I found a naturopath who wanted to test everything. And one of those markers that came back from all those tests led her to just question my exposure to toxic mold. And it was right then and there that it dawned on me. This was something that hadn't been on my radar at all until then. But as soon as she said it, it clicked. I had been living in the basement of a home that flooded about 2 years ago, 2 years before that. It flooded, and they didn't do a good job in repairing or redoing the place from that water damage. Soon came a diagnosis of chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is a collection of symptoms that happen in the body when it's exposed to these biotoxins such as toxic mold. My body was inflamed, and it was continuing to inflame at such a rapid rate to protect me from this toxicity. And it was essentially causing it to basically shut down. I was so happy at that point because I finally had an answer. Yes, it was a complicated answer. It wasn't really something I wanted to hear, but I had an answer. I wasn't going crazy. But what came after that was over a year of absolute madness, in the best possible way, I guess, because it got me here. It got me where I am now with so much advice and experience to share based on what changed in me physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually through that process. To say I hit rock bottom somewhere in that time, which is about 3 years ago, actually almost exactly 3 years ago to the day that I'm recording this episode of the Unstuck Podcast, I really even think that the word rock bottom is an understatement. I always call it bottom basement level. That's where I was because I couldn't live the life I wanted to live because I felt awful most of the time. My body wouldn't allow me to do the things I love to do. I had very few belongings at that time because I had to get rid of basically everything I owned, at least all of the porous materials that I owned, twice, because when porous materials are exposed to mold spores, they can't be washed out. So I got rid of all my clothes, blankets, pillows, towels, all that stuff twice. I had very little left in my life as far as actual material things. Not to mention, the weight gain made it so I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror anymore, which means I also lost all my confidence. I felt uncomfortable in my skin, and basically I hated myself. I isolated myself from my friends. I had no social life anymore. I cried most days of the week. And the big kicker, I was $12,000 in debt from the medical bills required to get out of the place that I was in. So you can see, I was kind of in a bad spot. But this also was the start of my life change to get me where I am today. Of course, looking back, and I think a lot of us can say this, those really bad times had a purpose. And now I understand that. And actually so grateful that I went through that because it gave me a whole new perspective on so many parts of my life. So going back to this bottom basement low, I knew how to work on my nutrition. I knew how to work on my physical body, but I didn't know how to work on my mindset. And that for me was a huge light bulb moment. It was just this sudden realization that popped into my head after a day of lying in bed crying that I absolutely could not live my life like this, that I had to accept what was going on in my life and learn how to live my best life regardless. I was just done not fully living every moment of my life to its absolute fullest. I wanted my happy, vibrant life back so badly. And now, exactly 3 years ago from that light bulb moment, I'm here on a mic talking to you about how to change your mindset because it works. And I am absolute proof of how it works and how profoundly it can impact your life. I'm happier and healthier than I ever have been in my whole entire life. No trace of the effects of mold, no trace of either autoimmune disease, no medication, tons of energy, great sleep, no pain, wonderful workouts, all the good stuff. My body settled back into its set point weight without any effort on my part. I have a thriving, successful business where I have had the immense pleasure of helping thousands of women all over the world with their health and happiness. I was able to clear my debt within a matter of months and was also able to purchase my dream home in my dream location and my dream car. The love of my life effortlessly entered into my existence after 6 years of the single life and really not wanting to be single, really trying to find a partner. And then as soon as I did the mindset work on that portion of my life too, effortlessly brought in the partner of my dreams. Another thing, I'm no longer dieting or following any sort of food labels after 20 years of being a diet hopper, restricting and controlling all my food, trying to manipulate the size of my body. I have complete food freedom. And I don't say any of this to brag. I say this to help you understand how incredibly powerful your thoughts are to the direction of your life. Change your mind and your life changes too. I am walking everyday proof of that. So there's my story. Now I want to get into how this podcast came to be. As I mentioned, during this time, I created a really awesome, powerful online nutrition business teaching women all about how to use food as medicine. I worked with over 100 women one-on-one and then over 1,500 women in a group format. But here's what happened. While women were getting healthier because of the dietary changes they were making, they were still struggling, at least in one aspect of their life, but oftentimes a lot more. We would work on their hormonal health, their gut health, their food sensitivities, their blood sugar imbalances, their inflammation and immune system responses, and yet all of the dots were still not connecting. They were still stuck. Again, another light bulb moment for me, which apparently happens a lot these days, which I now know is just my intuition talking, and we'll get into that a lot more in the Unstuck podcast, future episodes. But it made me realize that they were ignoring some pretty major pieces to the puzzle. Yes, food and lifestyle changes are an important piece to health, but they are just part of a really massive puzzle. Becoming emotionally, mentally, and spiritually well are, I would argue, more important to total wellness. But many of us only think physical health and only work and work and work and work to change that, ignoring the rest of the puzzle. So why do we do that? Well, I can tell you, because I've done it for myself, it's hard. It's really hard to do this mindset work. It's unknown territory. It's scary. It's intangible. It's easy to turn our back on that and just keep looking at the food, keep taking the supplements, keep getting your blood tests run when we don't want to look at what's really going on in our head, because oftentimes there's a lot to unpack and uncover, and some of it is scary, some of it hurts, some of it has a lot of negative emotion attached to it, so it's easier just to stuff it away. Now, this naturally led me to start including more mindset coaching into my nutrition practice. And only then did massive shifts begin happening for these women. Only then did they truly feel the health, happiness, freedom, and overall change that they were hoping to see. And then, of course, I wanted to take it to the masses, because if these women that I was working with could get such great improvements from simply looking at what's going on in their heads, that means there are women across the globe that need this kind of work too. And I want to be that person that brings it to as many women as I can, which is why we're here. And I am incredibly excited to get going with you. Now, before I wrap up and we actually dive into some of the goods coming up on the Unstuck podcast, I have a few asks for you, and they're pretty big asks, but I want to put it out there right here, right now. So hear me out, give me some time, and let's see if you can answer any of these big asks. The first one, keep an open mind. While I'm not super quote unquote woo-woo, and I'll use that term a lot, which I always use air quotes. So just know I'm here motioning air quotes in the air. I'm here doing that right now. And I'll continue to do that every time I use the words woo-woo. I'm not super woo-woo, but there may be things that you think seem a little out there or not true. These things might come up in these future episodes. But here's the thing, you don't need to fully get into this woo-woo side or things that you are a little skeptical of in order to get the practical application. And I will always make it practical. I will always give you steps to take that anyone can do, regardless of how much you believe in the kind of spiritual side of what I'm saying. So please keep an open mind. Number 2, do the work. Don't just listen. Listening to a podcast only gets you so far. You can listen and listen and listen and then go right back to your everyday life as soon as you hit pause. Don't just listen, but put the tools I give you into practice in your everyday life. Number 3, share this podcast with a friend or two. Anyone in your life that you think would enjoy this work or needs this work, please send it to a friend, or even better, post it on your social media to let people know of the new podcast that's out that you're listening to. Number 4, if you find that you're enjoying the podcast, please leave an iTunes review. This is so important and really the only way that it shows up in any sort of search or anything if women are looking to do this kind of mindset work too. This is both of these, sharing with a friend and leaving a review, are the greatest form of paying it forward that you can do. More women need this work. The only way we can get it into the hands of the people that need it is by sharing it and by leaving a review. So please, that would be absolutely awesome. I would love you forever. I already do love you forever, but you'd get a little extra love that day if you could leave a review on iTunes for me on this show. Number 5, follow along with my other content over on Instagram or Facebook. You can find me at Sean Miner on Instagram and Sean Miner Health on Facebook. Head to my website, seanminer.com, to see what I'm up to. Just stay involved, see what else is going on, and of course, take part in anything and everything that fits what you need. All right. That wraps up the first episode of the Unstuck podcast. I hope you are as pumped up as I am to finally get unstuck by either beginning or continuing on with your mindset shifts you're making to live healthier, happier, and more vibrant every day. All right, ladies, don't forget, be happy now. We'll chat again soon.